Good morning. Good morning. This is from the Peninsula Foundation. Today we are starting off a new series, the Expert Speak series. I'm Marshal. We have as a guest today a very well-known, distinguished person who is also a trustee and distinguished fellow of the Peninsula Foundation, Marshal Kapil. The topic today is welcome, sir. The topic today is on Kashmir, the current situation and the way forward. We are all quite familiar with what is happening and what has happened in the past. The idea is to look at it from a very from an expert's point of view, who's from Kashmir, who's been involved with a lot of processes there. And that is important to understand how we are looking forward to the Kashmir issue. Let me introduce Air Vice Marshal Kapil. He's an Air Force veteran with over 3.5 decades of experience, active service. He's also participated in the 1971 war. He's been also very well known in academic circles and intellectual circles. He's a regular speaker at military institutions and the universities. He's also a founding director of the deputy director of the Center for Air Power Studies in New Delhi. Air Marshal Kapil has been involved in considerably in Track 2 dialogues for many years, both in dealing with India-Pakistan peace issues and conflict resolution in Jammu and Kashmir. So his experience on hand is phenomenal. And this is something that we would like to, experience from his views on the subject. The current status in Kashmir is well known. It's been under lockdown since August 5th last year. There's a deafening silence. The Article 370 has been abrogated, and a restructuring of the state into 2 union territories has already been made. And what is the way forward? And what does that impact on the people, on the economy, on the culture? And of course, does it have a relationship with the kind of problems that we have with China today in the LAC in Ladakh? These are issues, these are some of the questions. And we will start with Air Marshal Kapil giving his views over the next 15 minutes, and thereafter we will get into a dialogue on this. So, on yours, look forward to your views.
Thank you very much. I'm in fact delighted and privileged to have this opportunity provided by the Peninsula Foundation and its founder, president and chairman, Marshal Matheswaran. He's already touched upon a couple of the issues which are so germane to Kashmir as we see it right now, as I speak. But maybe I will just, in a few words, capture a snapshot or an essence of where we are as a nation and a constituent part of the state that is Jammu and Kashmir. Firstly, it's a question of contested territories, contested nationhood. There is sub-nationalism of Kashmir, which has evolved over centuries, colliding with Indian nationalism, including its recently evolved ultra and hyper variants. Those are causing their own problems, but I need to flag them for our distinguished viewers. There has been, as a result of denial of the constitutional provisions guaranteed to Jammu and Kashmir as far back in 1950 when the constitution entered into force, those denials, the militancy arising therefrom in the last 3 decades, and of course, the state's approach of employing military means or militarization. And I'd like to draw attention to what Marshal Matsi has just enumerated, last year's audacious application of unproven or unvalidated constitutionally the actions that have been taken on the one hand by the ruling dispensation, and on the other hand, a sense of disempowerment and fear and hopelessness that you see on the ground. My focus in the presentations, in fact, I'm only left with about 8 or 9 minutes, will be on the people. How do the people see this action? Because, as I said, the clash or the collision is between what the people desire and what the center is willing or not willing to give them. Since security situation is a very, very important consideration. We already have a tension in eastern Ladakh on the line of actual control, but we do not see any dip in intensity on the line of control with Pakistan. Now, the strategic nexus between the two countries vis-a-vis India's rise and India's security and well-being are well known. I don't think this group needs to be reminded of that. But the important point here is our security forces and our central paramilitary forces have not allowed the situation to get out of control either in eastern Ladakh or in the last 20 years in J&K. But I want to stress here that the terrorist threat we saw, if we see last 2 decades, we saw a very distinct downward trend of the kinetics that we see on the ground between 2001 and say 2013. I give you just figures that gives an idea of how certain public policy approaches on Jammu and Kashmir can alter the situation so dramatically. And if we follow it up, we will see Kashmir resolved at the end of 7 decades of the conflict there. One factor is that of incidents. Terror incidents have gone down from 4,522. I'm giving you the precise figure because it's a government figure given in Parliament. 4,522 in 2001 to 170 in 2013. If we look at the total fatalities, which is security forces, civilians, and the terrorists, these have gone down from 3,552 in 2001, huge figure, to 135 in 2013. Now, what magic made this happen? This is a dramatic reduction in the matrices of violence, in the matrices of the conflict, which I'm analyzing for you today. Just one, a sense of vision, a sense of grand strategy of dealing with the foremost security challenge that India has faced since independence. And this was done by Atal Bihari Vajpayee in 2002 and was sustained by the party which replaced him, its Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, despite the ideological differences between two polar opposite parties. He sustained that process, and we saw what is called the 4-point formula for the resolution, virtually a draft for the resolution of Jammu and Kashmir. So I think this is important. The problem that we face now is that having not uh, continued with that dialogue option, whether it was with Pakistan or with our own people and their representatives and all the stakeholders from nearly 2007 onwards, there has been a 13-year-long famine of outreach, of political dialogue, of negotiation and talks with all the stakeholders who are involved in the resolution of a political problem politically, rather than the military means that the central government has adopted all these years, over a decade now. And more importantly, even the harder muscular options which have been adopted last 3 years. All these combined together have caused the Kashmiris, in every sense of the term, a terminal alienation, despondency, despair, a sense of hopelessness, overriding fear, especially after 5th of August 2019. And we see Marshal talked about lockdowns. Unlike the rest of India, Kashmir went through double lockdown. It had a lockdown within a lockdown because the political, economic, social uh, lockdown, which came as a result of the 5th August 19 action, virtually paralyzed the state. We had nearly 6.5 million people in their homes for 5 months. We had women who are pregnant delivering children on the roadside because there's no transportation. There's no way to reach a healthcare hospital. There's no communication with the doctor. Now, I'm putting this may seem dramatically, but if you go to the ground in Kashmir, which I do every month, this is the reality. The question is, do we want to be in self-denial? Do we want to be in self-deception? Or do we want to grapple with a challenge that faces us? The impact of the constitutional changes has even been worse because now, having done one lockdown, the pandemic combined with this has done double lockdown. As Marshal Matheswaran rightly said, it has been a continuous lockdown from 4th of August 2019. We have got fed up in the rest of India with the lockdown situation that prevails. Imagine the plight, precarious as that, of the people in Jammu and Kashmir, particularly Kashmir. We've had international ramifications. Obviously, the India model, which we were very proud of, a society as diverse as ours, put together in a pluralistic, democratic, constitutional framework. The world is watching Kashmir with as much of an eagle's eye as Marshal Matheswaran in Chennai and I in Delhi are watching. So, I mean, we have had, I mean, you read the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Guardian, any internationally recognized print media, and you will see how much of a kind of opprobrium India has received from the hand of international media. Governments are a little more chary because obviously India has a potential rising power status, and so it is a huge market, so they're a little more careful. Uh, Militancy, I want to suggest, 5 minutes that I have now, has been where it is. Unlike the justification which was given by the center at the time, Article 370 was nullified, 35A was abrogated, state was divided into two union territories, unthinkable because under the Indian constitution, no state can be made into a union territory. Opposite is possible if you read Article 3 of the Constitution. So these are all unconstitutional, audacious, not thought through public policy assertions, which have to see the light of the day. Supreme Court will come out with its judgment. Incidentally, I happen to be one of the petitioners against the action taken by the government in the Supreme Court. We are awaiting that. The economy of Kashmir, of course, the rest of economy of India because of the pandemic has gone through a toss. But the economy of Kashmir is in complete disarray because it also saw lockdowns in the period before, whether it's the horticulture sector, two tourism years, 2019 and 2020, they have evaporated. There used to be a million and a half tourists go to JK. No one now, not even in hundreds. You see, the horticultural produce has not reached the places where it has to reach. Education sector, healthcare sector. The 4G has not been. Every person in India, including sitting on a mountain top in Himachal or in Northeast, has access to 4G. But not the people of J&K. Ostensibly, because oh, terrorists can use it. Terrorism has affected J&K for the last 30 years. We didn't sort of undo any of the provisions which were available to people. The media, a very powerful organ of the state, it's called the fourth state. The media in Jammu and Kashmir is treated quite separately from the media elsewhere. The people who are in this forum at this moment, so dynamically organized by the Peninsula Foundation, would be aware that there is a new media policy in Jammu and Kashmir which puts the media people in fetters. There are instances, some of the most outstanding pro-India media persons, including senior correspondents of national dailies, have been halted in the cyber police station and asked to convey as to what is the source of the story they publish. Innocuous, anodyne story, but harassment. And the last, I think I still have 2, 3 minutes. Last is everyone weeps over the plight of the Kashmiri Pandit. Incidentally, I'm a Kashmiri Pandit too. Of course, they were clawed out of their geocultural moorings of millennia long, and it is the most hurtful thing for an individual to be taken out from his moorings, his or her moorings. But that has happened. It's very painful. But it is an utter shame for the people of India and the governments we have elected over the last 30 years that they have done zilch for the Kashmiri Pandits. Zilch, except to say that they must return. They have created no conditions for their return. But for Dr. Manmohan Singh, in 2012, he promised in a public gathering in addressing in Punch that he will do something for the Kashmiri Pandits. What has been done is to creation of a space between livelihoods and living space. I think that linkage has to be seen. People will not go to Kashmir on a holiday forever. I'm talking about Kashmiri Pandits. They will have to have jobs. They will have to be entrepreneurs. They have to be equipped for that. Jammu and Ladakh, my last 2 points, uh, have been a case of hit wicket. Jammu has a large presence of right-wing forces. So they have always had, and I can explain during question answer session if it's necessary, had a problem with Article 370. And primarily because the King's party, Maharaja Hari Singh's party, which was then Hindu Praja Parishad, transformed to Hindu Mahasabha, transformed to Jansangh, and then became Bharatiya Janata Party. So they have a large presence here. Even they are now rethinking whether they took the right step, because as a result of the application of the domicile law in Jammu and Kashmir, the maximum demographic change will take place in Jammu, and it will deny locals the opportunity to get jobs which were promised as far back as 1927 by Maharaja Hari Singh by starting what was then the equivalent of Article 35A, nothing more. Similar is the plight in Ladakh. Ladakh also is rethinking, and Ladakh we always believe is Buddhist. Regrettably, that's not the situation. Half of Ladakh is Kargil. Population wise, also half of Ladakh. Kargilis have nothing to do with abrogation of Article 370. They are so much in sympathy with the situation that the Jammu Kashmir people, particularly the Valley people, are facing. I think Marshal Mateswaran, if nothing else, you'll have to give me good points for sticking exactly 15 minutes. Over to
Oh,
you.
thank you, sir. Excellent, and that's a very very incisive overview that you've given. And in the context of, I think, very important point that you made is the constitutional validity of declaring a state into a union territory. I think that's a very very important point, and that we do hope the Supreme Court looks at it and comes out with a decision quickly on that, on a judgment quickly on that. But having said that, what is the solution for the kind of problems that we've had over the last almost half a century? And if I may go back into a little bit of historical roots, I think the foundational doctrine of India is based on secularism and freedom of practice of religions and faith and belief for individuals. And unfortunately, the kind of politics that we practiced all along has been completely opposite of that. So, isn't the major problem, germinated in Kashmir, apart from the dispute between India and Pakistan, using religion, and that has vitiated the whole process. It has vitiated the whole politics, and all the government, irrespective of which parties have been in power, have not had the guts to actually take a very very strong stand and abrogate people who use religion as a card to actually vitiate the atmosphere. Has that been done earlier, probably we wouldn't have come to this stage. But now that we've come to this stage, uh, was there any other way out other than abrogating 370 and removing the people to be able to play and with the religious card, and as a solution integrate the country state fully into the country's mainstream? Of course, the declaring union territory is a different issue completely. But do you think was there any other way out to move forward in this?
Uh, I deliberately didn't talk about the way forward because I thought I would be situating the appreciation rather than appreciating the situation.
Mm.
I think the way forward, you made a point, I'm sure there are others who will intervene, and I will bring in some points how we can move forward. I think it was unwise strategically, politically, constitutionally, to take the actions which were taken on 4th of August 2019. I don't have to belabor the point, I've already made those points. After all, if Vajpayee and Manmohan Singh only 10 years before could virtually resolve the issue of Kashmir through the 4-point formula, through outreach by center to the multi-level, multi-track dialogue process in the valley, as also activating the India-Pakistan situation, because that Pakistan is a factor. We are once again in self-deception and self-denial that it's a purely internal problem. But if we see the documentation of the Ministry of External Affairs and the speeches that have been made by our leaders, Pakistan is a factor. What kind of a factor it is for us to debate and how we negotiate. On the issue of religion, Marshal, uh, I see that much more in the rest of India than in Kashmir, except for the period 1990, when yes, the militants or terrorists of that time were inclined to believe that religion is the most fundamental point, and they must take a religious route, and that was the JKLF, then aided by Pakistani proxies, which is Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba. That is why the Kashmiri Pandit exodus took place, because they were targeted only for that moment. But if you see the record in the last, say, 15 years, uh, there are about 10,000 Kashmiri Pandits, Hindus, all over the valley,
Mm.
in locations which are numbering 202. They're mixed up with the rest of the population. Nobody has done any harm to them. But I don't want to comment. I think you and our distinguished people who are on this connectivity now, we've seen the record in India last 4 years.
Mm.
I don't have to give you a record from the Crime Control Board of the Government of India, or for that matter, Ministry of Home Affairs figures. The lynchings, the targetings that have taken place is all because religion is a factor in polarizing communities, and by polarizing communities, you meet the ideological foundations on which some of the dispensations are made and structured and
Mm.
founded. And when you do that, it comes very handy for electrocracy, which is what democracy in India has become. We are only talking about which is the next election and which is the public policy issue that I need to bring forward on the table. It's linked there. Oh, Bihar is coming, so I must concentrate on Sujit, that actor in Mumbai. If something else is happening somewhere, Hathras rape, now this will affect UP, so I better handle UP. So, regrettably, what founding fathers, as you said in your opening remarks in this question, had sought for India, I'm afraid is all unraveled. We will have to reinvent a new India for a new world. Because unless we go back to the constitutionalism, the secularism, the pluralism, the federalism, which is guaranteed in the Indian constitution, unless every educated citizen of India swears by the constitution as he or she gets out of the house in the morning, I'm afraid we are going to fail, because societies which are transforming from conservative agrarian societies to modern nations always go through this huge turbulence, whether it was Russia in the Russian Revolution, France in the French Revolution, Chinese in the Cultural Revolution, the Great Leap Forward, America in the Civil War. All these are nothing but manifestations. We have to be very careful in terms of the policies we evolve, implement, and follow up in our day-to-day public life.
Absolutely. I think the importance of federalism is that's the nerve of the Indian union, and if that is under threat because of over centralization, that's a thing that we need to be very, very worried about. Let me come to the issue in the lockdown, particularly as we mentioned. It's been unfortunate that the state has been under lockdown for more than a year now because of the political lockdown and followed by the pandemic lockdown and the privations that the people have gone through. The economy is taken a hit. Kashmir is dependent, economy is dependent on two major, as you pointed out, on major industries. One is the tourism, the other one is horticulture. And both have taken a massive hit. The schools have locked down for more than a year. So how do you think this is going to impact, even if the government wants to open out and as the government claims that much of focus will be on development and people employment will be generated. There's the chamber that has already mentioned that there's a 4 lakh job loss over the last 1 year period. And how is this going to play out in terms of economic development and people's aspirations?
As I mentioned, economy is in complete disarray. When on my visit to Kashmir with a group of concerned citizens, we talked to hundreds of people, and the points I want to highlight what you just said. It is the business community, it is the shopkeeper, it is the trader, it is the shikarawala, it's the houseboat person, is the owner of a hotel, it is persons who have orchards, whether apples or cherries or apricots or pears, handicrafts. Some of the orders are not possible unless you have 4G. Kashmiris have been denied 4G till today. Until 4G is restored, as you said, the problem of the students, it is horrible. The students would come to Delhi from Srinagar and then do online work on 4G. Can you imagine the difficulties that have gone through? I think the central government it's aware of what the problems are. I would not say that they are indifferent, but they're not inclined to move on that pathway because it is part of a larger ideological framework which undergirds the party structure of the ruling dispensation. I don't want to go into details. I think everyone here is wiser than me. They would understand the point I'm trying to make. It's a far larger issue. The second is that Kashmir is seen as it's a Pakistan initiated problem. Kashmiris have no role, they are slaves of Pakistanis. Nothing is farther from the truth. If I give you figures of just the dead, 2018 out of 257 terrorists, 142 were Kashmiris. 2019, just last year, and these are Ministry of Home Affairs figures, out of 152 terrorists who were killed, 120 were Kashmiris. So you see the result of the alienation, and why that alienation? Political, psychological, emotional, the sense of disempowerment, sense of discrimination. That I am not what a person of Bhopal or a person from Kolkata or a person from Patna is. So unless this is what I'm saying, we are a great democracy. Unless the government takes the path of reaching out, unless it starts to talk to the youth, talks on multi-tracks, as I said, or multi-levels, yeah, I'm afraid the rest of the problems are not difficult to resolve. You had talked about union territories in the act when the announcement was made in the parliament. Home Minister Amit Shah had said, once normalcy is restored, we will restore the full statehood of the state. What prevents the government? In what way is Kashmir a fire in terms of violence parameters or any other matrices which should bother India? No. Kashmiris have shown maturity. They haven't come out on the streets out of fear of the soldiers who are in every street. They have come out of a deliberate strategy. In fact, Marshal Matheswaran, they have strategized better than the central government has. Because the central government thought bloodshed will take place in every street. They were preparing for violence which could lead to 5 to 7,000 casualties. Nothing
mm,
like that happened because Kashmiris chose the Gandhian way.
mm.
They said we will do self imprisonment. Some of the lockdowns are imposed by people. We'll
People.
not
Okay.
come out. Secondly, mass civil disobedience. I mean,
Mm,
that is what we see. I don't see Kashmiris now taking on, although more youth are joining militancy, but whether they will actually use militancy because there are no weapons, there's no training, especially in South Kashmir, which is the center of gravity of militancy. North Kashmir is better, but unfortunately, North Kashmir doesn't gel with the impulses of militancy and terrorism. They are more peaceful and more inclined towards a normalcy situation. So I think this is my view is that the government will have to put its act together, roll back some of the very draconian moves that have been made in the state, whether it is 4G, whether it is domicile law, whether it is the question of delimitation commission. Delimitation commission is against constitution again. It
mm,
lays down what are the parameters for delimitation. Now, if our ruling government is taking actions which are undemocratic and unconstitutional, I don't think I am empowered enough to critique the government. Uh, their actions speak for themselves.
mm. Absolutely. One of the most important, issues is about politics, and we know, the how messy politics have also been cause for the kind of problems that we had in the past. But notwithstanding that, the post August 5th, the political process in Kashmir has been completely brought to a standstill, with major leaders in being virtually under house arrest for such a long time. And the process of getting back to a vibrant democratic process of vibrant politics is completely in disarray at the moment. What do you think is going to happen now when we revive or attempt to revive the process? Will there be a serious problem in the political process? That is one question. And second, the issue of having restructured the state into union territories, have you played into Chinese hands with the kind of track record that they have done in Xinjiang and in Tibet? We've drawn the attention away, and they've the problem that we have now in Ladakh and LAC seem to actually we played into the Chinese hands through this process. Is that true?
No, I would, with your permission, disagree with you on just one or two small points that came in your narrative. The first is the examples aren't similar. Xinjiang, we have not questioned that Xinjiang is a part of China. But J&K is an issue. It is an
Hmm.
issue between India and Pakistan. It's an issue between the central government and the people of Kashmir, primarily because the central government has gone back on the promises which are enshrined in the Constitution of India. The second point you made, I think, is very valid, extremely valid. In fact, that is of biggest concern to me now, because the revival of political process is conditional on what the government is willing to give by way of democratic and federal impulses which have been snatched away from the Kashmir. You made a great point, sir, about the political leadership. The political leadership, which was kind of in many ways ostracized, was the political leadership which brought Kashmir to India in 1947. These are the people who have held the flag of India uh, in every forum, national or international. whether it was Geneva Human Rights or it was the United Nations, who were part of the Indian delegation, Farooq Abdullah, his father Sheikh Abdullah, they were holding the flag. And now you put them in the same league as the hardliners, as the separatists, as the terrorists. So you can do no greater damage than dynamiting the foundation of the mainstream, moderate, pro-India leadership. And now that is why they feared this on 4th of August. Last year, they issued out the Gupkar Declaration. What was it about? They feared what was going to happen. And they said, we will fight hard to retain the position that we have in the Indian Union based on Article 370 and the associated articles. On 22nd of August this year, almost a year later, they have reiterated those provisions. And I want to share with the group, which is part of our deliberations, that the people who issued the declaration and who are the mainstream parties are approximately 60 out of the 87 members who were elected in the last election. So, do we need more uh, evidence of the majoritarian support of the causes that they're outlining before the center? So I think this is the area which is extremely challenging, because having done something without impacting, you're a outstanding strategist yourself. Uh, you know that if you take an initiative which you haven't thought of, the consequential impact will be unmanageable. That's what we are now.
Absolutely, sir. Before we get your views on the way forward, let's take a few questions. There's one from Kanchana Ramanujam. Sir, are we to believe that there is no influence of LA Hadises and other hardline groups on the ongoing radicalization of the valley, especially their infiltration of the schools?
Kanchana has made a very valid point, and this is something which must concern us. First and foremost, the process of radicalization began as far back as 1980, when Iranian revolution took place, and the Saudi Arabians were very worried whether they would also face a similar predicament sooner or later. So that is the time Saudi Arabia went all over the world with a program to Islamize societies, tell them the values of Islam, and one of the products of that was Osama bin Laden. So there is you can anchor the impulses or the points that Kanchana has generated. Kashmir was not left out of it. It also, in the initial stages of the insurgency in 1990, impacted the movement itself. I made that point earlier, especially JKLF, although a very moderate group, was influenced by Pakistan, which in turn was influenced by the Saudi Arabians and the Taliban in Afghanistan. And the result is, yes, there is radicalization. It has increased in recent years. There were 2 dozen mosques of the Ahle Hadith or the what is called the Wahhabis in 1990. Today there are about from 2000, 2 dozen is gone to about 1,500. So the Kashmiri Sufi society, it came in through changes in religion, but the speciality of the identity of Kashmiris was sustained through the Sufi Shaivite interlinkages. And that's what made them, joint support for each other's shrines, for example, was one factor. Pursuit of knowledge and engagement with every view. This was the Sufi Shaivite thing. A deep pride in the valley's history of religious and philosophical inquiry as the foundation of a plural society. This is what Kashmir was about. So the central government's aim, instead of strengthening that, it is taking actions by which Pakistan gets strengthened. As you mentioned, China finds a new place. Kashmir is now trilateralized because Chinese officially are saying we do not accept the 5th August 2019 bifurcation and creation of a union territory of Ladakh, which we claim as part of ours. again, if we are doing discussions with Chinese from 1993 onwards, 1996, 2005, 2015, and the various summits Prime Minister has both in Gujarat as also in Tamil Nadu and Manipur, what are we then talking about? So I'm afraid the actions that have been taken in the recent times are only going to increase radicalization. But I want to assure people that Sufi Islam is still strong in Kashmir, even as younger people who are alienated tend to take the more radical line.
That's excellent, sir. I mean, what you said about Sufi Shaivat interaction and forming the core of Kashmiriyat is, I think, absolutely valid, and that's what needs to be strengthened. We have another question from Satish TK. How relevant is the popular Insaniyat, Kashmiriyat, and Jamhuriyat slogan today, given the political climate of JNK? Is it alive or is it seeing a painful death?
No, I don't want to go into expressions and idioms which can convey different types of kind of meanings. The fact is, as I said, if Sufi Islam is still continuing, if multiple religions, if we go back to 300 BC, Emperor Ashok named what is today Srinagar. That Srinagar
Mm.
name came from Emperor Ashok. In in 100 BC or thereabouts, the Kanishks organized a global Buddhist council. We're talking about globalization today. I'm talking about globalization 2000 years ago in Kashmir. And then we see the evolution of Buddhism to Hinduism to Islam. But that character of Jamhuriyat, I wouldn't say Jamhuriyat, Jamhuriyat is a recent phenomena, but Kashmiriyat and Insaniyat remained. That human, it is not a tolerant society, it is a loving society. It is an accommodative society. I have lived in neighborhoods of multiple faiths, and it is amazing how festivals were celebrated together. It's done even today when Kashmir has gone through so much. I want to give you one instance that in Sufi mosques today, there is a concept called Darood Sharif. At the beginning, there is praise for Allah and the Quran, and this would interest Satish Sahab a great deal. It begins with, which I just said, Darood Sharif. What is this? This is singing of Allah's praise in Sanskrit hymns in Arabic. It's happening today.
Wonderful.
So, all that you say, Insaniyat, Kashmiriyat, and Jamhuriyat, is under attack, but it is alive. And we need to keep it alive. If we want to resolve Kashmir issue strategically, that's what we need to do, Satish Saab. Thank you for asking that question.
Wonderful. Absolutely. We have Vishal Badri's question. I question the constitutionality of abrogating 370 and 35A by suspending state apparatus and giving agency to a central representative seems convenient as it coincides with the center's agenda. Well, I think we've already spoken much about that. Go ahead, sir. Yes.
I'm not a lawyer. I'm basically a flyer. But being involved in Kashmir, virtually at ground zero for 2 decades and more, uh, first and foremost, the constitutionality of dividing Kashmir into 2 union territories, I just mentioned, you don't need to be a lawyer, just have to open the constitution and you will see Article 3 doesn't permit it. The center has chosen not to delete Article 370 altogether for the simple reason that if it deletes that, Jammu and Kashmir is then no more a part of India. Because Article 1 says the India will comprise Maharashtra, Gujarat, whatever, Jammu and Kashmir, and there is a bracket, subject to Article 370. So what the center has done, rather astutely, it has used Article 367 to amend Article 368, again prohibited by the Constitution. You can't have one article amend another article. Lastly, any action regarding Kashmir had to be done by the state legislative assembly. That state legislative assembly is now, as per the changes made, represented by the governor, who is also the state of Jammu and Kashmir with the council of ministers who don't exist. If you see, I'm reading out, I don't have the time to explain every bit and piece. So,
Mm.
in other words, if you have to make changes to Jammu and Kashmir, you can't make it, or any state, without consultation with the legislative assembly of that state. Whether it's Tamil Nadu, it's Karnataka, it's Maharashtra, or Jammu and Kashmir. It's been done. And how has it been done? The legislature will be represented by the government, which comprises the lieutenant governor, and in fact, then the lieutenant governor takes his own permission to take actions which he is required to take as a lieutenant governor because there is no assembly. So, what Vishal Saab has said is I agree entirely with you. This is a charade. If the Supreme Court has to play with the due utmost respect for the Honorable Supreme Court, if it has to read the Constitution strictly as per the letter and spirit of the Constitution, whatever actions have been taken on the 5th of August 2019, to my mind, to my limited mind, as I said, I'm not a lawyer, will be declared ultra vires of the Constitution.
Thank you, sir. Here's another one. This is Kanchana Ramanujam. Is there any distinct pattern of cross-border infiltration post August 5th?
Kanchana, you see, you have to look at pattern is a function of geography. And geography is a function of where the plains are and where the mountains are, and where there are routes of ingress and egress. We see that bulk of the infiltration is in the northern areas, Kutwara, Gurez, that area, because the southern part doesn't give any approaches because there is Pir Panjal range there, and Punch and Rajouri and other areas are across. So infiltration has been countered a great deal, and here I want to compliment the security forces because there is a three-tier grid which has got technologies, which has got human face, and which has got structures to ensure that no infiltration takes place. Now the Pakistanis have chosen the instrumentality of coming in without weapons, and weapons being supplied through either UAV drops or some other ways. So this is to ensure that they can have a go through. Those routes are still active. Far more crucial, Kanchana, I'd like to suggest, is not so much the infiltration. Infiltration level is going up. That has been said by the army chief now and previous army chiefs. But it is the cross-border violation, which is a desperate means because countering the Indian counter-insurgency grid, the best way is to keep firing at the Indian posts so they get distracted and they can sneak in the infiltration. But this is something which the security forces and the top military levels will have to be very, very alive to. That's important.
Thank you, sir. And as a final, overview from you on the way forward, let me put this question: both 370 and 35A, are they irreversible? One, and second is what's the way forward? Because we need it. If I may say, Kashmir is the jewel of the Indian Union, and if you need that to be, looked after well and integrated well in our, culture, civilization, and the political process, what's the way forward? And are we, given the kind of developments that both Pakistan and China's collusion is taking place around, isn't there a bigger issue in terms of security, in terms of integration, as a big challenge to the political leadership in tackling this?
The only way forward, Marshal, is thinking strategically and thinking in terms of a larger vision of where do we see India in the decades ahead. I'm afraid it will be very difficult for the current government to jettison its ideological baggage. And that jettisoning of that baggage will cost it in electoral terms. And for any politician, the way forward is smelling power and opportunity to get to form a government and dispense patronage. So I'm afraid on the way forward, I'm not too positive. When we look at the J&K side, political mainstream would be the right way to move forward in multiple ways. Let's not forget, only 2 years ago, 2 years and 2 or 3 months back, we had a coalition government of the ruling political dispensation and the People's Democratic Front led by Mehbooba Mufti. And that was jettisoned in a jiffy because the larger purpose was to punish the Kashmiris. Now, with tensions on the line of actual control, with there being no dip in the insurgency or cross-border violation or terrorism and its proxies by Pakistan, we will have to do our sums all over again. First and foremost, restore statehood. We don't need, that's the easily, it's low hanging fruit. An announcement can be made by the Home Minister, and that can be done. Although it goes against the Act, which has been introduced by Parliament, it can be done through an ordinance. Secondly, release all the political leaders. We still have a former Chief Minister who's under preventive detention in a sub jail, which is her home. Third is restoration of uh, Article 370 will be very, very tough for the government because it's a question of political legitimacy. I realize that although I know it needs to be done, but here the way forward is an outreach. Go to the stakeholders and say that they have a consultative process, and as a result of this consultative process, we are doing some marginal changes to reflect the political aspiration of the people of Kashmir. Fourthly, without blinking an eyelid, restore 4G. It is causing, I give you an example, Marshal Matheswaran. There are 7, 8-year-old children who are cursing their parents from dawn to dusk as to why they denied the opportunity to play games on their phone. Every child in India is
That's right.
playing games. It's an issue of humanity. It's an issue of addressing sensitivities of children. They are the future of India tomorrow. And would they not remember that they were denied this right by the center? Will it not remain in their DNA for the next 3 decades? This is a question we have to ponder over. The new media policy has to be rolled back because unless we encourage all shades of opinion to be freely and peacefully expressed as in rest of India, why make an exception of Kashmir? Popular government is the need of the hour. It is the Brahmastra, I would say the silver bullet for resolving the J&K issue. But no people will come to join the electoral exercise unless they have the structure in place on which they will say, we will fight our cause with the center to restore peace, stability, and brotherhood in the valley of Kashmir, which is the key point. I mean, this is equally applicable to the people in Jammu and Ladakh. I think I would like to conclude on this point and say other ways forward will come. You have to have a torch with you. Once you get onto the way, then you will have to use the torch and find other ways which will take you forward. Otherwise, as of now, and I don't want to conclude on a negative, it's an oxymoron because there was a way forward on 4th of August 2019. Then you go into the pits, absolutely pits. You can't go below that. And now say, ask yourself, what is the way forward? What is the way forward when you're sitting in a pit?
Climb up. It's true. Absolutely. Well, thank you, sir. And I think what you said is, if I sum it up, restore the dignity of statehood to the region, to the states, and bring the political process life back again. Bring discussions, bring talking with people, get the people into play. I think that's what probably will, address the issue, at least as a starting process. And thank you so much, Marshal Kapil sir. It's been a
I would,
wonderful
I would
exposition
like
from you.
to take this
With all your
opportunity.
experience, with all your knowledge on the subject, I think it's been a wonderful, session for us. And this being the first session for Peninsula Foundation, I think it's been a good start with you. I thank the audience for having, been with us, and we do look forward to more such, expert speak series sessions. We will keep you informed. Thank you so much, and Jai Hind. All the best.
Thank you, Marshal.